Next we'll work on section 3, and section 3 is a square part of the house, and it's all the pieces are medium weight chipboard. They're listed here under section 3. I've got just some of them here on the table in front of me because we need to do some prep work. And there are 2 pages of templates, page 3 and page 4. We'll start with the outside of the house, and that is side 1 of the side 1s, or side 3, they're the tall ones, and one of the side 2 or 4, which are the shorter ones. So I'll just put these other 2 aside for a moment. And then on the taller one, we need to make a gable end like we've been doing before, where we find the center point and then measure down 3/4 of an inch. So I'll do that on my taller piece here. And then we need to cut out an opening on each one. On the short piece, the opening opens to the right, and on the taller piece, the opening opens to the left. They both are a 1/2 inch in from their outside edges, start an inch up, and are 2.5 inches tall. So you should end up with a mirror image kind of thing going on, just like you see in the template. So I'll go ahead and get those cuts made. So here are my 2 outside pieces with their holes cut. So these are the 2 inside pieces. Again, on the taller one, I want to cut a gable so I'll make tick marks down 3/4 of an inch and a center tick mark and cut that gable. And then on these pieces, we'll measure 1 inch in from the outside for this border so that the openings are only 2 inches wide. The bottom one is a normal 3-inch, a normal rectangle. So I'm going to cut that, and then I will come back and with you I will draw the shape for this top one. Alright, now that I have these rectangles, I'm going to do this part at the top. I'll start by continuing my 1-inch border line up here. So I'll get this part right here. This is a 1/2 inch space in between the 2 sections, so I'll draw a 1/2 inch. And then at the open edge, it's 1 inch plus a 1/2 inch, so 1.5 inches. So I'm going to make a tick mark at 1.5 inches above that 1/2 inch line. So here we are. I've drawn this 1/2 inch line, and then I made a tick mark right here at the 1.5 inch part. And then over here on this side, this is only 1 inch tall, so I'll use my ruler to mark that inch. And then I can connect this tick mark with this one out here. And that gives me that shape. I'll hold it this way. And that gives me that shape. So I'll cut this one, and I'll measure this one the same way, just it's the mirror image, don't forget. And here are the 2 inside pieces cut. Now I have my 4 dormer pieces here, and I'm going to start by cutting the gable on 2 of them, and I'll measure down a 1/2 inch on either side, a 1/2 inch, and find the center point and cut the 2 triangles off. And I'll do that on just 2 of them to start with. So now I've got the gable ends cut on 2, and I'm going to take each one and glue it to another one, making sure that the bottom edges are even. Once you have them glued together, you're going to trim off the corners on the other one, either with a craft knife or with your scissors. And that's our little dormers that we can just put aside for now. Before we join the walls, we need to do a little more prep work for ledger strips. And I think you can see I've got all my pieces laid out here on top of their templates. And the side that is facing down is the inside. So I'm going to take each one of these, flip it over, and write inside on it so that I don't get confused about what's going on. So I'm going to start with these 2 pieces that only have one hole cut in each one, and I'm going to flip them over so I can see the side that I wrote the inside on. And we want to add some ledger strips on here, and you can see I already got started down here at the bottom. I cut a ledger strip that was 2 inches, and I held it back a 1/2 inch from either edge, the left and right edges, and a 1/16 of an inch up from the bottom. So a 1/2 inch from either left and right side, and a 1/16 of an inch up from the bottom. And next I'm going to do kind of the same thing above this hole. So I'll cut 2 more pieces that are 2 inches long. And these pieces, they're held back a 1/16 of an inch from the top of the opening, and then again about a 1/2 inch from either side. Then I'll turn the pieces upside down, and on this one that has a squared off top, I'll just take another 2-inch ledger strip and hold it back a 1/16 of an inch from that top edge, and again a 1/2 inch from either side. And on this one I need to draw a line to see where to put that strip, and I'll just use this other piece as a helper, and I can just find out where that top of that piece is and draw a tick mark on either side, and then connect those tick marks. And then that line is at the same level as this edge, so I want to take this ledger strip and hold it back a 1/16 of an inch from that line. So that's the prep for those 2 sides. And I just keep putting them back on the template so that I know what side is which. Now we're working on the side that faces the inside of the house. It has the 2 openings on it. Again, I'll flip them to the sides where I wrote inside. And here we'll do some things the same and some things a little bit different. So I'm going to start out by putting a ledger strip at the very bottom, and then drawing my line across the top and putting a ledger strip for the top, just like we did on the other side. So those are both, all 4 are 2 inches long. Next I'll cut 4 pieces that are 1.5 inches long, and we'll start from the bottom. This first one is going to still stay a 1/2 inch away from the right edge and a 1/16 of an inch below the opening, and we can repeat that on the other side. And then another one will go up here next to this angled side. Again, it'll stay a 1/2 inch away from the right side here and a 1/16 of an inch above that angled side. And then I'll repeat that on the other side. And we have one more piece to go on, and that's going to go here in the center. Now on the cutting guide, we have something called a wide ledger strip that is 3/8 of an inch wide. And that's what I have here. And I'm going to cut two pieces that are 1.5 inches. And these pieces get centered up and down and still held back 1/2 inch from their outside edge, so that since it's 3/8 and this was cut 1/2 inch, that'll give us a 1/16 of an inch on either side. And that's our prep for these pieces. So I'll again bring in my template and put them on top so I have all of my pieces organized. I'm going to start the joining of the walls with the two pieces we just completed. I'm going to flip them over. And then I'm going to use some joining strips to put them together. So cut your little joining strips to the proper length and put them on one side so a folded edge comes right up to the edge. And once you have that accomplished, remove the score tape backing from the other side and make sure you get them aligned correctly, butt them up, and put that other side down. Get your bone folder and give them all a good burnish, and then check to see if there's anything overhanging, and if so, give it a little trim. Now we can add on our other two pieces, and we'll flip them so we're looking at the inside. And you want to make sure that you alternate a ridge. So I have a ridge here on the pieces I already joined. So now I can use one really long joining strip to go right there, and I'll do that. Again, this is a butt joint between the two. I'm using a line on my gridded mat to make sure that the bottom is nice and straight and even. And I'll fasten that down, and then I'll give it a good burnish. And then this one could go over here, but this will be a much easier join to make. So I'm going to just take this one and put it over here and make these two joins. Make sure you burnish every time you make one of these joins. And then we have one last join to make here, so we'll add a joining strip along one edge. When you have that along one edge, remove the backing paper, fold it to the inside, and then this one should come and butt right up against it. And you should get one last nice join there. And once you've made that join, reach inside and burnish both sides of that. So this is the shell, and let's continue on. We'll take our center piece, and our center piece is going to fit down so that you can see it behind the windows on both sides. Now kind of push it down so it's flat on your table and the construction is flat on your table, and then give it a squeeze. But make sure you're holding on to it very firmly so that everything is even at the bottom. And then take a pencil and draw next to all of these openings. Just the top and bottom. You don't have to worry about the sides. Hold on to it firmly, flip it over, and do the top and the bottom on this side. Then you can take that out. Now this is the bottom. I'm going to actually take my chalk pencil and I'll write bottom on here. And I want to remove 1/16 of an inch from the bottom. 1/16 of an inch. So that's the width of a piece of chipboard, so you can use a piece of chipboard as a measurer, or you can just cut it off. You want to do it fairly accurately because this will help keep everything level when we put all the floors and the ceilings in. So I'm just using, I have a ruler that has 16ths on it so that I can easily do this on my craft mat. Now I'm starting on the side that matches the 1-hole side. And I'm going to cut 2 strips that are 3.5 inches long. Now on the bottom one, we want to bring the top of the ledger strip right up next to that line. And I'm also going to take a ruler across here because my line, it has a little bump in it where the crease from the side of the wall is. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping this very straight on here. And then I'm going to take my 3.5 inch strip and just center it on there. Now for my top one, I want to hold the ledger strip 1/16 of an inch above the line I drew. So I see my line and I'll leave a 1/16 inch space and then I'll put my ledger strip down. Now that we have those strips on, we can flip it over. Now on the other side, I forgot to say when we put this panel in that we want to make sure it's centered. So I've taken it, I have it out here, and I've just erased the angled lines that were at the top. And I'm going to draw a center line that comes down as far as the 1/2 inch lines here. So this panel was 4 1/4 wide, so I'm just going to use my gridded mat here and draw a center line. And then I'll slip this back inside of here and line up the center line. Gets lined up with these two, with this split here, and the 1/2 inch line should line up with the with that bar that comes across there. And once you have that lined up, then go ahead and draw that angle line that's right along the top there. And that'll be right. Okay. And erase this center line because we don't want to get confused. Let's start with a 3.5 inch piece of our wide ledger strip, the one that's 3/8 of an inch wide, and we can center that in between the two, this 1/2 inch space that we have right there. Then I've cut another 3.5 inch strip of my regular ledger strips to go down here at the bottom, and we'll hold that 1/16 of an inch below that line. So this one goes 1/16 of an inch below the line. And then I just have a couple of little scraps that I'll use up here at the top, and when I put these down, I'll keep them 1/16 of an inch above that slanted line on each side. Then I'm going to take my eraser and erase all of these lines just in case they're not perfect. I don't want to see any lines when we put it together. Now that we've prepped our center panel, we can go ahead and put our base in. So I'm just going to turn this over and run a bead of glue along those ledger strips, and I'll continue the glue into the corner even though I don't have a ledger strip in each of those corners. So this is what I meant by taking the glue into the corners on each one, even though there isn't a ledger strip there. And then you just put your base panel in. I put a rubber band around the bottom, and then I'm just putting it on my mat to make sure it's square. Now this one is going to be about 3 1/8 inches square, so just make sure that it is square. If you've cut that base piece nice and square, you will have a square bottom to this section. And I'm just going to let that thoroughly dry. And now that the base is thoroughly dried, I can add the center panel, and I've got my big gluer out here, and I'm just running a bead of glue in that corner on both sides. It's a pretty thick bead of glue, so I have it in the 2 corners on the inside there. And then I'm just going to make kind of a, it's hard to tell exactly where the diagonal is, so I just kind of made a squiggly line across the bottom there. And then make sure that you put the panel in with the correct side facing, and it should fit snugly right down in those 2 corners. I'm just bending it apart a little at the top so I don't mush all the glue to the bottom, and then bring it back square. And we know we have the base square. I'm just going to take, I'm not going to glue the top in yet, but I'm just going to put it in here and put a rubber band around it so that I know that this will stay square while this center panel is drying. Now while the glue is drying on our center panel, we can do some prep work on the floors and ceilings that go in the boxes. I'll start with inside box 1 ceiling. This is a piece that is 2 1/8 by 2 1/4, and I'm going to start by cutting a diagonal. Once I have that diagonal cut, I'm going to take my 2 triangles and I'm going to join the 2 1/8 inch sides. So this is a 2 1/8 inch side, and there's the other one. And so I'm just going to make a butt joint between them and use a joining strip to do that. So here is my joined piece, and I've got a piece of scrap cardstock here, and what I'm going to do for these pieces that we're making now is just trace around them, because when we go to put decorative paper on, we'll want to know what the shapes are for these. And so I'm just going to draw around each one as I make it and write what it is. So I just wrote the section number and then what the piece is. So this that we just made will go in box 1, which is the top box on the inside, and it's the ceiling. And then we have 2 squares that we cut at 2 15/16 inch on both sides. And those are going to be the floors and ceilings for every other part except for the floor on the outside, the one where we just have the 1 hole. So I'm going to cut each one of those diagonally. So now I have 4 triangles to use for floors and ceilings, and I took one of them and traced it out on my template sheet. And I'll just set these aside. And then we can work on the outside box floor. This is a square that is 3 1/4 inch square. And we'll start by just cutting a diagonal. And once you have that diagonal cut, you can just put one of the triangles aside. So here is my triangle, and the first thing I want to do is measure from the corner on each of the straight legs over 2 5/8 inches. And just put it on your craft mat or use your ruler and measure 2 5/8 inches from the corner in this direction, and then on the other short leg measure from the corner to the left. And there are those 2 tick marks. Now I'm going to take my ruler and line up 1/8 of an inch along this edge so that I can mark a little notch there, and I'll do that and then bring it up to the camera. So this line is 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and we're going to cut out these 2 little notches, one on each side. So now we have a piece that's shaped like this, and I'll again trace it on my template sheet. So after you've cut these little notches, you can do a dry fit. Just put this piece on an angle and it should slide fit real nicely in there. There's some overhang on the front sides, and the corners should fit nicely in there. And so when you're happy with your dry fit, you can take that piece out, and we'll run a bead of glue along that ledger strip in the back, and then right on the top edges of the space here in the front. And then again, just put this in at an angle to begin with, and then slide it down into place. Then we can turn it upside down, and we can take one of those 4 triangles that we have, and we'll put glue on the ledger strips here, and this one fits inside. So just rest on those ledger strips and it will be even with this edge here. We'll just hold that for a minute until that glue gets a chance to grab. Now we'll come to the inside of the building, and we can just put glue on each of these sets of ledger strips. I'm going to do the floor on the bottom space first, then the ceiling on that space, and then the floor on the top space. And then I'll come back and we'll do the ceiling on box number 1 together. Now this is the floor for box 1 at the top, and it's just easiest to drop that in from the very top. And you can see I've put a rubber band around here to hold that center section together. The ceiling for box 1 will be a snug fit, and you may want to do a dry fit first. Just kind of fold it in half a little bit and stick it in through this front opening. And then open it up. It should fit inside of this corner that's right here, and the other corner should go right up against those ledger strips here in the back. And it will be snug, but it should fit just right. And if it doesn't, you can do a little trimming, but if you've cut accurately, you shouldn't have a problem. So then I'm just going to let it rest down here for a moment while I put glue on my 4 ledger strips. I have 2 in the back there, and then the 2 in the front, and then I'll push it up in place. Make sure you get some glue on the inside of this front corner, even though there's no ledger strip there. And what I like to do is to put this corner in first and then push up the two sides. And then I just put a rubber band around there to hold it in place. And then now that we have all of the floors and ceilings in, we can take our top piece, run a bead of glue around the top, and put that top piece in. I again extend the glue into these corners even though there's no ledger strip there. Just hold with some good pressure because it's important that this stays nice and square, and that top piece is what allows you to make sure that it is square. I've got a rubber band around here, but until that glue grabs on, I'm just going to hold it for a few minutes. So I put a couple more rubber bands on. I made sure that they're not going to distort the sides of the building here. I'm just going to let this set up and thoroughly dry. Next, I'm going to add sides to each one of these three openings. Now, this may be a little fiddly for you, and in the cutting guide, these pieces are marked as optional. So watch how I put this together, and then if you decide that that's just too fiddly for you, just don't put them in. And I think it will look fine without them. I just wanted to have something, especially on the inside, that mimicked more of the openings that are on the square-sided boxes. So let's start on the outside box, and there's 4 pieces. They're each 2 7/16 inches long, just so that they will fit inside of this opening. We're going to take one, put some glue on it, and it's going to go on the back panel. Actually, there'll be 2 of them, one on each side. It's going to go on the back panel and slide all the way into the corner. And it's going to provide us a gluing surface back there. So we'll take, they're all 4 the same, just take one on each side, put some glue on it, and stick it back into the corner as far as it will go. After I put the first one in, I realized it was easier to put some glue on that back panel in the corner, and then I wouldn't make such a mess with the glue. And so now that I have the glue in there, I'll just stick the panel on top of that glue. Now we're ready to put the side panels in, and we'll run a bead of glue along the edge of that little panel that we put in there, and then the side panel is actually going to fit behind the opening here, so I'm going to run glue right on the inside edge here. Sorry, right on this inside edge of the opening. And then I can take my panel, rest it up against that strip in the back, and it should squeeze in right here on the front. You might have to use your craft knife to encourage it a little bit, but it should fit right in on the side there and give a nice finished edge. So there's the side panels on the outside box. On the inside box, on box number 2 at the bottom, it's the same thing. We just have wider strips. There's again 4 of them. Put some glue on the inside and slide one all the way in the back till it meets that corner. And then the other panel will come in on the side. And again, I'm just putting some glue on the back wall there. I put some glue up along the edge and some glue on the inside of the opening. And when I put these in, I put them against that strip on the back first, And then I just gently put them in place behind this side panel using the tip of my craft knife to kind of hold them in line. These are a little bit bigger on the inside, so they're easier to manage. And I'll repeat that on the other side. Now for the top section, it's the same process. Because there's this angle going on here, sometimes back into the far corner, it's not quite an inch tall. So I'm just going to kind of clip off the corner so that when I put it in there, I don't have to worry about did the roof come too low. But other than that, it's the same procedure. So the only thing to really watch out for when you're putting these together is to make sure that those back support pieces go all the way into the corner so that they're not coming out too far into the box. Otherwise your side pieces will end up being a little bit short. So that's the construction for section 3. We still have 2 roof pieces left over and our dormers that we made. And somewhere, oh, here's my strip of that I haven't cut to length for the little roofs for the dormers.